I kissed my sister's husband before she did, and now I don't know if I can ever look her in the eyes again. My name is Amanda. I'm 28 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had my whole life figured out. I was engaged to Derek, my high school sweetheart, who proposed after we both graduated from Northwestern. We had the house picked out in Naperville, the wedding date set for next spring, and everyone said we were the perfect couple. My parents adored him, my friends envied what we had, and I told myself every single day that I was lucky. But then my younger sister Rachel announced she was getting married in Chicago, and everything I believed about myself shattered in one single night. Let me take you back to the beginning, because I need you to understand how this happened. I need you to see that I'm not a terrible person, even though what I'm about to tell you might make you think otherwise. Rachel had always been the wild one in our family, the spontaneous spirit who lived by her heart rather than her head. She met a guy named Marcus at a music festival in Austin, and 3 months later, she called us all to say they were getting married. 3 months. My mom nearly had a heart attack. My dad questioned if Marcus was even real, and I just smiled and pretended to be happy while secretly judging her for rushing into something so important. If you're already hooked by this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because what comes next gets even more complicated, and you're not going to want to miss how this all unfolds. The wedding was planned for a Saturday evening in September at this gorgeous venue overlooking Lake Michigan. Rachel wanted everything to be intimate and romantic, so she kept the guest list small, mostly family and close friends. Derek couldn't make it because he had some work conference in Denver that same weekend, something about quarterly reports that couldn't be rescheduled. I remember feeling relieved, actually. I loved Derek, of course I did, but sometimes being around him felt like wearing shoes that almost fit, but pinched in places I couldn't quite identify. I thought maybe a weekend alone would do me good, give me space to miss him properly. The rehearsal dinner was on Friday night at this little Italian restaurant in the West Loop. That's when I first saw him. Not Marcus, the groom, his best man. He walked in late, apologizing about traffic from O'Hare, and when our eyes met across that crowded restaurant, something inside my chest just stopped. I don't believe in love at first sight. I never have. But this wasn't love. This was recognition, like my soul knew his before my brain could catch up. He had dark hair that curled slightly at the edges, eyes that seemed to see right through every defense I'd ever built, and when he smiled at something Marcus said, I felt that smile in places I didn't know existed. His name was James. That's all I learned that night. James from Seattle, Marcus's college roommate, in town just for the wedding. We barely spoke during dinner, just polite small talk when Rachel introduced us, but I could feel him watching me, and God help me, I wanted him to watch. I excused myself early that night, told everyone I was tired from the drive, and lay awake in my hotel room wondering what the hell was wrong with me. I had Derek. I had a ring on my finger. I had a whole life planned out. But my mind kept replaying the way James's hand had brushed mine when he passed me the bread basket, the electricity that shot through me from that one innocent touch. Saturday arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, and a gentle breeze off the lake. I spent the morning with Rachel, helping her get ready, watching her glow with the kind of happiness I wasn't sure I'd ever felt. She kept talking about Marcus, about how he made her feel alive, how being with him was like coming home and going on an adventure at the same time. I hugged her and told her I was so happy for her, but inside, I felt hollow. When was the last time Derek made me feel alive? When was the last time I felt anything other than comfortable? Before we get to what happened at the ceremony, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Trust me, you're going to want to follow this channel for more stories like this one, because what I'm about to tell you next changes everything. The ceremony was beautiful. Rachel looked like a dream in her dress. Marcus couldn't stop crying happy tears, and I stood there as the maid of honor trying to focus on my sister's joy instead of the man standing across from me holding the rings. James looked devastatingly handsome in his suit, And every time the officiant talked about love and commitment and choosing each other every single day, his eyes found mine. Not Marcus's, not the bride's. Mine. I should have looked away. I should have focused on my sister. But I couldn't. It was like we were having an entire conversation without words, asking questions we had no business asking. The reception started with all the usual traditions. First dance, toasts, cake cutting. I gave my maid of honor speech and somehow managed to sound sincere and loving, even though my hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the microphone. James gave his best man speech, and he was funny and charming and perfect, and when he raised his glass to toast the couple, his eyes were on me again. Always on me. I tried to avoid him. I danced with my dad, with my uncle, with a few of Rachel's friends from college. I drank more champagne than I should have, trying to blur the edges of whatever this feeling was. But then the DJ played something slow, and suddenly James was there, hand extended, asking if I wanted to dance. I should have said no. If I could go back to that moment, knowing everything I know now, would I say no? I honestly don't know. We danced. His hand on my lower back felt like fire through the fabric of my dress. We swayed together. Not talking, just moving, and I could feel my resolve crumbling with every breath. Finally, he leaned down, his lips close to my ear, and whispered, "Tell me you feel this too. Tell me I'm not crazy." My throat was so tight I couldn't speak, so I just nodded. That tiny nod was all the permission he needed. What happened next is something I've replayed in my mind 1,000 times, trying to figure out where I could have made a different choice, where I could have been stronger. James said he needed some air, said the reception was getting too loud. 5 minutes later, I told Rachel I was going to the bathroom to fix my makeup. Instead, I followed him outside. We ended up on this secluded terrace overlooking the water. The music from the reception was just a distant hum, and the city lights reflected off the lake like scattered diamonds. James turned to me, and I could see him wrestling with something, the same war I was fighting inside myself. "I can't stop thinking about you," he said, his voice rough with honesty. "I've tried all day. I keep telling myself you're taken, that this is wrong, that tomorrow I fly back to Seattle and never see you again. But Amanda, I can't remember the last time I felt something this real." If you're still with me, wondering what I did next, go ahead and subscribe to the channel because this story is far from over, and the choices I made that night set off a chain reaction I'm still dealing with today. I should have walked away. I should have told him I was engaged, that this couldn't happen, that we needed to respect my sister's wedding day. But instead, I heard myself say, "I feel it too." And just like that, the door I'd been trying so hard to keep closed flew wide open. He stepped closer, and I didn't back away. His hand came up to cup my face, and I leaned into his touch like I was starving for it. When he kissed me, it was nothing like kissing Derek. This was hunger and desperation, and something that felt dangerously close to destiny. We stayed on that terrace for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. Kissing, holding each other, whispering confessions we had no right to make. He told me about his life in Seattle, how he'd been engaged once too but called it off because it didn't feel right, how he'd resigned himself to maybe never finding that spark everyone talks about. I told him about Derek, about how safe and predictable our relationship was, about how I'd convinced myself that passionate love was just something that happened in movies. We both knew this was temporary, that tomorrow would come and reality would crash back down. But in that moment, we chose to live in the fantasy. Eventually, we had to go back inside. Rachel was looking for me, wondering where her maid of honor had disappeared to. I plastered on a smile, blamed the champagne for making me need fresh air, and tried to act normal. But James's taste was still on my lips, and every time I caught his eye across the room, I felt that pull again. We were playing with fire, and we both knew it. The reception wound down around midnight. Rachel and Marcus left for their honeymoon suite, throwing rose petals and laughter behind them. Guests started filtering out, heading back to their hotels or homes. My parents hugged me goodnight, told me they'd see me for brunch in the morning. And then it was just a handful of us left. The wedding party and a few stragglers finishing the last of the wine. James leaned against the bar, watching me. The question in his eyes was clear. I knew what he was asking without him having to say a word. I knew that if I walked over to him, if I said yes to whatever came next, I would be crossing a line I could never uncross. My phone buzzed in my clutch. Derek, sending a goodnight text from Denver, telling me he loved me, that he couldn't wait to see me tomorrow. The guilt hit me like a physical blow, but not enough to stop me. Subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more true confessions like this one, because what I'm about to tell you next is something I've never admitted to anyone, and you need to hear how far down this rabbit hole I fell. I walked over to James. I didn't say anything, just took his hand. He understood. We left the venue together, and I'm not going to give you explicit details because that's not what this story is about. But I will tell you that we went back to his hotel room, and what happened between us that night was everything I'd been missing without even knowing I was missing it. He touched me like I was precious and wild at the same time. He learned every part of me, not just physically but emotionally, asking me questions in the dark about my dreams and my fears and what made me feel alive. We talked until the sun started creeping through the hotel curtains, and somewhere in those hours, I fell completely and utterly for someone I had no business falling for. When morning came, reality hit hard. I was supposed to meet my parents for brunch. Derek was flying back from Denver that afternoon, and I was lying in bed with my sister's husband's best man, still wearing my maid of honor dress from the night before, crumpled on the floor where James had carefully removed it hours earlier. He was awake too, watching me with those eyes that saw too much. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice quiet. I didn't have an answer, so I did what any coward would do. I got dressed, kissed him one last time, and left without making any promises I couldn't keep. I told him we'd figure it out, that we'd talk soon, but we both knew the truth. He lived in Seattle. I lived in Chicago. I was engaged. This had been one perfect, impossible night, and now it was over. Except it wasn't over, not even close. I went home to Derek that Sunday, and he pulled me into his arms talking about his conference and asking about the wedding, and I felt like the worst person alive. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time Derek touched me, I thought about James. Every time Derek kissed me, I compared it to that terrace overlooking Lake Michigan. I was living a lie, wearing my engagement ring like a shackle, and the guilt was eating me alive. James texted me 3 days later. Just a simple message asking if I was okay. I shouldn't have responded, but I did. And that opened a door we couldn't close. We started talking every day. Texts became calls. Calls became video chats late at night when Derek was asleep. James told me he couldn't stop thinking about me, that our night together had ruined him for anyone else. I told him I felt the same way, and God help me, I meant it. We talked about what ifs. What if we'd met before Derek? What if I wasn't engaged? What if he lived in Chicago? But we always came back to the same impossible truth. This couldn't work. Too many people would get hurt. Make sure you're subscribed, because the next part of this story gets even messier, and I promise you're not ready for what happened when my sister found out. 2 months went by. 2 months of living this double life, being Derek's perfect fiancé during the day and James's secret love at night. I was planning a wedding I didn't want, picking out flowers and napkin colors, while my heart was somewhere else, entirely. Derek noticed something was off. He'd ask if I was feeling okay, if I was stressed about the wedding planning. I'd lie and say everything was fine, and he'd believe me because Derek always believed me. That might be the worst part. He trusted me completely. Then Rachel called. She wanted to meet for lunch. Just the two of us, sister time. My stomach dropped because I knew. Somehow, I just knew she'd found out. We met at this cafe in Lincoln Park, and she ordered for both of us like nothing was wrong, chatting about her honeymoon in Bali and showing me pictures on her phone. But when the food came, her smile dropped. "Amanda," she said, her voice careful, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. She pulled out her phone again, but this time she opened Instagram. Marcus had posted a photo from the wedding, a group shot of the wedding party. Someone had tagged James, and when Rachel clicked through to his profile, there I was, in his stories. Not from the wedding, but from a recent video call. Just a screenshot, my face on his screen, both of us smiling at each other like people who were absolutely not just friends. "Want to explain why my husband's best man has a picture of you looking at him like that?" Rachel asked, her voice shaking. The cafe around us kept buzzing with normal life, people drinking coffee and eating sandwiches, completely unaware that my world was imploding. I could have denied it. I could have made up some story about us being friends, about staying in touch after the wedding, but I was so tired of lying, so tired of pretending. So I told her everything. I watched my sister's face crumble as I spoke, watched her process the fact that on her wedding night, while she was starting her honeymoon, I was with James, watched her realize that I'd been lying to her, to our family, to Derek for months. When I finished, she just sat there staring at me like I was a stranger. "How could you?" she finally whispered. "At my wedding, Amanda. At my wedding." She stood up, grabbed her purse, and walked out of the cafe without another word. I sat there alone, watching my relationship with my sister dissolve because I'd been too selfish to control myself. She didn't answer my calls for weeks, didn't respond to my texts, told our parents she needed space from me without explaining why. My mom kept asking what happened, why Rachel was suddenly avoiding family dinners if I was going to be there. I couldn't tell them the truth. Not yet. Stay subscribed because we're reaching the climax of this story, and trust me when I say you need to hear what happened when Derek found out the truth. Derek proposed that we move up the wedding date. He thought my stress and distance was about planning anxiety, that if we just got married sooner, everything would be better. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so devastating. I knew I couldn't marry him. I knew I had to tell him the truth. But every time I tried, I lost my courage. How do you tell someone who loves you unconditionally that you betrayed them? How do you destroy a person's trust and break their heart in the same conversation? James was pressuring me too, in his own way. Not directly, but I could feel it in our conversations. He'd started looking at jobs in Chicago. He'd mentioned apartments he'd seen online. He was building a fantasy where I left Derek, where we could be together for real, where this wasn't just stolen moments and secret phone calls. Part of me wanted that fantasy so desperately it physically hurt, but the other part knew what it would cost. My family, my reputation, Derek's heart. Everything I'd built over the past 10 years. Then the choice was taken out of my hands. Derek came home early one day from work. I was on the phone with James, sitting in our bedroom, laughing at something he'd said. I didn't hear Derek on the stairs. Didn't know he was there until he walked through the door and saw my face, saw the way I lit up talking to whoever was on the other end of the line. "Who is that?" he asked, his voice already suspicious. I could have lied. Could have said it was a friend, a coworker, anyone but the truth. But I was so tired of lying and hiding and being someone I wasn't. So I told James I had to go, hung up the phone, and looked at the man I'd promised to marry. "His name is James," I said quietly, "and I need to tell you something." The conversation that followed was the hardest thing I've ever done. Derek didn't yell. He didn't throw things or call me names. He just sat there on our bed, crying, asking me how long and why and what he did wrong. That last question broke me. "You didn't do anything wrong," I told him through my own tears. "You're perfect, Derek. That's the problem. You're perfect and safe and everything I thought I wanted. But I don't feel alive with you. I'm so sorry, but I don't. He asked if I loved James. I said I didn't know, that it was complicated, that I'd met him at Rachel's wedding, and we'd been talking ever since. Derek's face when I mentioned Rachel's wedding, when he realized I'd been lying to him for months, will haunt me forever. "Get out," he finally said, his voice hollow. "Take whatever you need and get out. I can't even look at you right now." I packed a bag and left the house we were supposed to share forever. I called my mom from my car, sobbing so hard I could barely explain what happened. She was shocked, disappointed, confused. She asked if I was having some kind of breakdown. Maybe I was. I drove to a hotel and sat in the parking lot, realizing I'd just blown up my entire life. No Derek, Rachel not speaking to me, my parents ashamed. All for what? A man in Seattle I'd spent one night with and months talking to on the phone? Subscribe to this channel if you're invested in finding out what I decided to do next, because I'm about to tell you the part that nobody saw coming. I called James that night, told him everything that had happened. There was a long pause after I finished, and I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. Finally, he said, "I'm booking a flight to Chicago. I'm coming to get you." Part of me soared at those words. This was it. This was the romantic gesture. The proof that what we had was real and worth all the destruction I'd caused. But another part of me felt nothing but dread. He arrived the next morning. We met at the hotel, and seeing him in person after months of just screens and photos was surreal. He pulled me into his arms, and I let myself be held, let myself believe for just a moment that this could work. We spent 3 days together, barely leaving the hotel room, existing in this bubble where the outside world didn't matter. We talked about our future, about him moving to Chicago, about starting over together. It felt possible. It felt real. But then reality crept back in. Rachel sent me a long message. She said Marcus was furious, that James flying to Chicago to be with me felt like a betrayal to him too. She said our parents were devastated, that Derek had called my dad crying, trying to understand what he'd done wrong. She said I'd destroyed not just my own relationships, but rippled out damage to everyone around me. And she asked me one question that I couldn't answer. Was he worth it, Amanda? Was one night with a stranger worth destroying your family? I read that message while James was in the shower. I sat on the hotel bed, reading it over and over, and I felt something crack open inside me. What was I doing? I'd known James for one night and months of phone calls. I didn't really know him. I didn't know his worst habits, his fears, what he was like when things got hard. I'd built him up in my mind as this perfect escape from my perfect life. But what if he was just another mistake? What if I'd destroyed everything for a fantasy? When James came out of the bathroom, I was crying. He sat beside me, concerned, asking what was wrong. I showed him Rachel's message. He read it, then took my phone and set it aside. "Don't let them make you feel guilty," he said. "We deserve to be happy. You deserve to be happy." But that's the thing. Did I deserve to be happy after what I'd done? Did I deserve to just walk away from the wreckage and start fresh with someone new? Here's where I need your help, and I really need you to comment below after subscribing to this channel, because I'm at a crossroads and I genuinely don't know what the right choice is anymore. It's been 2 weeks since James flew back to Seattle. We've barely talked. He's waiting for me to make a decision, to tell him if I'm going to take this leap with him or not. Derek wants to talk, says he might be able to forgive me if I cut off all contact with James and we go to therapy together. Rachel still won't see me, but she sent another message saying she'd be willing to try if I end things with James and prove I'm serious about fixing what I broke. My parents are torn, wanting to support me, but also not understanding how I could throw away 10 years with Derek for someone I barely know. And James. James texts me every few days. Nothing pressuring, just checking in, reminding me he's there. He sent me a job posting yesterday, one in Chicago that he's thinking of applying for. He's ready to uproot his entire life for me, for this thing between us that might be true love or might be just a fantasy I got too caught up in. I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to run to Seattle, to choose passion and the unknown, to believe that what James and I have is worth all of this pain. But another part of me wonders if I'm just running away from the mess I made. If I'm choosing the easy path instead of staying and facing the consequences of my actions. If I'm being selfish again, just like I was on Rachel's wedding night. Derek represents everything safe and known. Going back to him means trying to rebuild trust, means therapy and hard conversations, and probably years of him wondering if I'm really there or if I'm still thinking about someone else. But it also means familiarity. It means my family back. It means Rachel might forgive me eventually. It means repairing the damage instead of abandoning it. James represents the unknown. He's passion and intensity and all those feelings I thought were just in movies. But he's also risk. What if we're just good at texting and one night together was a fluke? What if the reality of being together is nothing like the fantasy? What if I leave everyone behind for him and it doesn't work out, and then I have nothing? And here's the really complicated part that I haven't told anyone yet. I'm starting to wonder if the real problem isn't Derek or James. Maybe the real problem is me. Maybe I'm someone who will always wonder if the grass is greener, who will always be looking for something more even when I have something good. Maybe I'm not capable of being satisfied, and that terrifies me more than any other choice I have to make. So I'm turning to you, because I need perspective from people who aren't living inside this mess with me. What would you do in my place? Would you choose the safe path, try to repair what you broke, go back to someone who loved you unconditionally even after you betrayed them? Or would you choose the unknown, take a leap of faith on something that feels electric but might burn out just as fast? Would you choose yourself, walk away from both of them, and figure out who you are without anyone else's expectations? I genuinely don't know anymore. Leave me a comment below telling me what you would do. Be honest. Be harsh if you need to be. I need to hear truth right now, not comfort. And if you're not already subscribed to this channel, please hit that button because I'm going to post an update in a few weeks once I've made my decision. And you're going to want to know how this story ends. Or maybe it doesn't end. Maybe this is just the beginning of a whole new chapter I haven't figured out yet. Thank you for listening to my mess. Thank you for not judging me, or if you are judging me, thank you for at least hearing me out. This has been the hardest few months of my life, and sharing it with you actually helps more than I expected it to. I'll be back soon with an update. Until then, I'm Amanda, and I'm still trying to figure out what the hell I'm doing with my life. What would you do in my place?